Well, good morning. You probably didn't think that you're going to get to see my face today, but the Lord is full of surprises, so here I am. I figured I would just preach a little one-off sermon until I can get back to being with you guys and start our new sermon series that we'll be going through. But Mike was originally supposed to fill in, but as many of you have probably heard, I'm sure he was in a motorcycle accident. I'm sure you've probably heard that by now. If you haven't heard any updates recently, he's doing okay. He is mostly just kind of banged up. Maybe he's there with you guys. I went to go see him tonight being Saturday night before he's with you guys. But if he's there, you've seen him and you know exactly how he's doing. He was his normal self. That was nice to see. He was really bummed about, not being able to preach for you guys this morning. So, he's hanging in there. He's doing all right, and he is trusting God as he always does. But today for our sermon, I wanted to talk a little bit about equipping. I wanted to talk a little bit about equipping. I want you guys to think about some tasks. I want to have you guys think through some different tasks that you might have to accomplish. They can be anything big, anything small. They can cover any kind of area of life. I think of oftentimes my vehicles, which have been having a lot of issues recently. I've been having all kinds of stuff going on with my truck, and I'm sure by now some of you guys are probably cracking jokes about how it's because it's a Ford. I would use my Mustang as another example, but it's also a Ford, so I'm sure I would still be getting the exact same kind of jokes. Unfortunately, I don't get to hear you guys laugh at me to my face, but maybe you'll laugh at me when I get back next Sunday. But when you're working on a vehicle, there's different things that have to be fixed. And those things that have to be fixed require very specific kinds of tools in order to fix them. You have different wrenches, different socket wrenches, different breaker bars, whatever it may be that you need for whatever you're doing on your vehicle, you're going to need different tools. Now, if you don't have those tools, as I have come to find, it's very difficult to actually work on those vehicles and get those parts replaced and get them fixed and do what you need to do. If I were to hand you just simply a screwdriver and tell you to go and fix the engine of your car, maybe your spark plugs are bad. That's something that I've had to recently deal with. Maybe you have to replace the fan or replace just a serpentine belt or something like that. Whatever it might be in regard to your engine, if I only hand you a screwdriver, that's not going to do you a whole lot of good when it comes to fixing that problem. When it comes to grilling, when it comes to cooking, as many of you guys know, I've sort of started to try to pick up grilling. John has been giving it his best shot at teaching me, and I am not exactly the world's fastest or best learner, but I've been trying to learn how to grill. If I were to hand you some meat and tell you to throw it on the grill, and it's a nice steak, and you have to flip the steak at a very specific time, if I hand you chopsticks, you might be able to pull it off. You might be able to use those chopsticks to flip the steak. Maybe if I were to give you a spatula, you could. But something tells me that if I were to hand you a spaghetti noodle and tell you to flip the steak with a spaghetti noodle, something tells me you might have a difficult time. You know, you have to have the right tools. And I know that this sounds really funny, probably dumb. Maybe some of you guys are chuckling. Maybe you're wondering where I'm going with this. The point that I want to make is that you have to have the right tools, and oftentimes you have to have the right skill sets. Now, skill sets can be learned, and tools can be given to you. Now, there's a story in the Bible that we find in the book of Exodus. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of time to turn with me to Exodus chapter 35. Now, Exodus chapter 35, we find the Israelites outside of Egypt, right? So they have already been saved from the nation of Egypt. They have already been saved from Pharaoh, and they have been wandering in the wilderness. Now, during this time, God gives Moses a bunch of commandments that they are expected to follow, the Israelites are, right? So that's where you get your 10 commandments. You know, thou shalt not have no other gods, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not lie, you know, those kinds of commandments. God also gives them another set of laws. There are over 600 different laws that the Israelites were expected to follow. Now, if that's not enough, you know, as if that's not already enough that these people have to worry about getting done, God also gives them different instructions of things that they are supposed to build and establish. So they are expected to build a tabernacle. And so this tabernacle, this place of worship, the place that the presence of God is going to dwell in, they're expected to build that. Right? And so they're expected to build that, and God has very specific instructions about how this thing is supposed to be built. But not just that, there are certain kinds of clothing that the priesthood is expected to wear. So there are certain garments that they're supposed to wear. There's a certain kind of breastplate, chest plate type thing that the high priest is supposed to wear that is supposed to be covered in different kinds of jewels. And there's certain measurements, and there's certain styles, and there's certain fabrics, and there's certain things that are expected of this clothing for the priests. And so God has given them all of these things that they are expected to not just follow, not just rules and laws that they are expected to follow, but he's given them these different tasks that they are supposed to accomplish. Now, God is not some kind of prankster, right? So he's not some kind of prankster who puts them up to these impossible tasks and then gives them some kind of impossible tool or skill set that they're going to need, right? God is not some kind of prankster like I might be, of having you try to, maybe screw a screw into a piece of wood, and then I hand you a wet noodle and tell you good luck. I expect you to do this. He's not going to hand you a car engine and only hand you a banana and tell you that you need to go and fix your car engine and then not give you the tools in order to fix your car engine. That's not the way that God operates. And we see a passage that I think is kind of small, and typically it's overlooked when we start reading the passage. When we go through the Bible, if you are the kind of person who likes to read through the entire Bible in 1 year, you might have come across this story and not really thought anything of it. But I think that there's something really powerful and really moving about this situation that we find some people in this book, in the book of Exodus in chapter 35. So in Exodus chapter 35, we're going to be looking at verse 30. It says this. It says, Moses then said to the Israelites, "Look, the Lord has appointed by name Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. He has filled him with God's Spirit, with wisdom, understanding, and ability in every kind of craft, to design artistic works in gold, silver, and bronze, to cut gemstones for mounting, and to carve wood for work in every kind of artistic craft. He has also given both him and Aholiab, son of Ahisamach, of the tribe of Dan, the ability to teach others. He has filled them with skill to do all the work of a gem cutter, a designer, an embroiderer in blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, and fine linen, and a weaver. They can do every kind of craft and design artistic designs. Now, I know that this seems like a really minor portion of the Bible. I know that this seems like something where you're just kind of reading and it's very easy to overlook, and you're probably wondering, Richard, where are you even going with this? Why is this important? Why do we really care about these two people, Bezalel and Aholiab? What is so special about them when it comes to them having to build a tabernacle, having to carve wood, having to work with gemstones, having to work with various linens and different kinds of thread? Like, why are you talking about this? What is so special about this passage? I would argue that the reason that this passage is so important is because of how unimportant it seems. Let me say that again. I think this passage is important because of how unimportant it seems. Oftentimes in our lives, when we think of God and when we think of how God works, how God moves, how His Spirit works in His people, when we think of those kinds of things, our minds almost immediately jump to the really big things. Oftentimes our mind really jumps to the big things. We think of how the apostles were able to speak in tongues. We look at how they were able to bring people to their feet who could never walk before. We think of people who were blind and were made able to see. And we think of some of the miraculous things that the apostles were able to do. We think of the miraculous things that Jesus was able to do. And we focus so much on all of these big ideas and all of these big, huge, important things. All of these supernatural, miraculous things. And oftentimes we overlook how God's not only present in the big picture things. He's also present in the small, little, unimportant details. The things that you and I think don't matter, God values. God is able to work all things for the good. He's able to use all things, not just the things that are big, not just the things that are huge and miraculous and powerful and awe-inspiring, but even the things that are small and unimportant. God can use those things too. God gave a task to the Israelites, and it wasn't big, it wasn't massive. It wasn't to create these huge different miracles and to do all of these miraculous things. It wasn't about that. It was about what God wanted His people to do. It was about whether or not they were going to be faithful to doing it. And it was about how God gives them His Spirit so that they can do these things. Right? That's what we see. In verse 31, it says that He has filled him with God's Spirit, that He has filled Bezalel with God's Spirit to go and carve wood, to go and build a tabernacle. God is still building. I don't know if you know that. God is still building. While He might not be building tabernacles anymore, while He might not be building huge buildings and temples, while He might not be requiring all of these priestly garments and requiring all of these fancy linens and all of this amazing woodwork and all of these intricate carvings, while he might not be requiring all of these different gemstones for his worship, God is still building. He's building his kingdom, and he's building it here on earth. And guys, God has given us the tools to build his kingdom. He hasn't asked us to do some impossible task. He hasn't given us this huge task that can't be done and then said, good luck, you're on your own. He has given you and he has given me the tools to build his kingdom. I would argue that the tools that he uses, that he puts into our hands, that he puts into our lives, themselves. Our lives themselves. The stories that you and I have. The things that God has gotten you through. The hardships that you have faced. As many of you know, I've gone through a lot of different hardships in my life, and I've lost a lot of loved ones. And I've witnessed and I've experienced a lot of hard things. And oftentimes, when we go through hard things, it's easy to start to question God. It's easy to wonder if God even knows what he's doing with our lives. Those different hardships, those different things, in a weird way, I can't help but feel like those have been a gift that God has given me. And I know that's weird. I know that's hard, and I get that that's not necessarily an easy pill to swallow or the most pleasant way to think about hardships in life. I know it sounds crazy to think that my dad passing was a gift. I know it sounds insane to think that when my fiance was killed in a car crash, that God was giving me a gift, that he was giving me a tool. I know that stuff sounds crazy. I know it sounds like, what kind of gift is that? Why should I follow a God who would give a gift like that, where God gives us hard things and allows us to go through hard things? And oftentimes, that's one of the arguments that gets brought up about why God's not real, is because if God was real and if God was good, then why does he allow these bad things to happen? But maybe, just maybe, sometimes he allows these bad things to happen to us so that his greater good is accomplished through us. I want to repeat that. Maybe God allows bad things to happen to us so that God's will and God's goodness can be seen through us. God is building his kingdom. He's building his kingdom, and he's using regular, everyday things and regular, everyday people like you and like me. He uses our stories. He uses our hardship. He uses even the easy things that we've gone through. A lot of people come from a lot of different backgrounds. You might not have had this huge life filled with a bunch of sinful things. Your story might be filled with things like drug use, with things like substance abuse. Your life might be filled with things like pain and like grief, but your life might be filled with a lot of different blessings. Your life might be the kind of life that has never really strayed into sin, that has never really strayed into brokenness, that has never really strayed into drugs and substance abuse. Maybe your life has, for the most part, been exempt from pain. Maybe you just haven't really lived life all that long and you wonder how God could use your life. But guys, God can use your brokenness, and he can use the things that seem like they're healed. He can use that brokenness, and he can use the blessings. things. He can use the good and he can use the bad. He can use all different kinds of things in your life to further his kingdom here on earth. The reality is that this kingdom that God is building, this church that he is building here on earth, he's using the everyday, mundane things. He's using broken people like you and like me. He's using the people where it's their first time sitting in a church. And he's using the people who have sat in a church their whole lives. There is no limit to who God can use and how God can use them. We see that the Spirit equips his people. If God has given you a task, then he will give you the means, the tools, and the skills to accomplish that task. Because God doesn't just leave us out to dry. He doesn't just give us some impossible task and not give us any way of accomplishing it. Guys, we serve a God who equips us.